Hello and welcome to another lesson of All About Stamping. Today I wanted to talk about Papertrey ink and their stamps, mainly their stamps, but also the other products that they carry, and then make a card for you using a lot of their products. So Papertrey ink is a company that lots of beginning stampers aren't familiar with because they do not sell to retail stores. You can only buy their products through the Papertrey ink website, which is papertreyink.com. But a lot of people love Papertrey ink, and once you get started buying from Papertrey ink, you get kind of addicted very easily because their whole system is really set up to draw you in and have a whole bunch of simple basic stamps along with collections that you can easily build and add on to. So first of all, if you're familiar with my blog or website, you know that I use Papertrey ink color cardstock for pretty much every project I make. I actually made this color chart that has a square, a 1-inch square of each color that they have released. This is actually the older version. I have a newer version that actually includes Simply Chartreuse because I forgot it the first time. So I need to make the new one for this, but you can download the updated copy at my blog at brittaswiderski.com, and you can make your own if you wish, or you can just look at mine for reference. And I really like and enjoy their cardstock. It's really thick, really heavy duty, and really awesome. And if you are not familiar with Papertrey ink and are just starting out wondering what to buy first, I have a video that shows you my recommended, first buy from Papertrey ink. So I'll put the link here on the screen. You can just click to go to the video and then come back to this when you're done watching it if you want a little bit more information on what I would pick to start out with. But along with their cardstock, they have impression plates, which are basically like embossing folders, only you use them with these tan embossing mats on top, and then you just treat it exactly like an embossing folder. Your paper goes here and then you run it through. You can see my storage system for the impression plates and my dies is kind of primitive, but this is what works for me right now. And then I have a lot of their dies here. Some of them match stamp sets and some of them are just more basics, like these Limitless Layers, which are just 5 circles that are 1 3/4 inch. They have a bigger set as well, but they each have different edges. And then they also have ones that coordinate with stamps. So I keep those all in here, and I have written the name on the plastic bag that they come in. And with the stamp sets that have matching die, I usually just keep that with the stamp set so that I remember to use it when I use the stamps. So those are the Papertrey ink dies. You can use these just how you would run any other wafer thin die through your die cutting machine. And then I have my stamp sets. They come with these awesome CD cases and the decals to put on them so you can store your stamps in your CD cases. They also have a label on here. This one's right here. You can cut that off and put it on the spine, but I like mine white so that I can actually read them on the side. And I just keep them in this CD bin. I bought this from Target for probably like $8, and that way I can just flip through them really easily. I have my $5 sets just in their original packaging with their, in some cases, die. And things like series, like signature series, these were 4 $5 stamp sets. I put these all in one. And you can actually order the decal images for each one of these $5 stamp sets if you want to put them in CD cases as well. I just really haven't gotten around to that yet. Basically, their Papertrey ink's images are meant to be very versatile, and usually those are the ones that I buy. For example, the Matte Stack 1 collection, you can use this on any type of card you will ever want to make. And it has the coordinating die to match. They also have wonderful Year of Flowers series and a lot of really awesome flower stamp sets. And their background stamps are really awesome as well. They're background builders, so you put this stamp on a block and then stamp it over and over to make your complete background, and that really gives you a lot of bang for your buck. So those are most of the ones that I have. I have a couple thematic sets like studio style where it's all about crafting, so these are really fun to send to crafty friends. And I guess Butterfly Dreams is kind of a thematic set because it's all butterflies. But other than that, they have wonderful Christmas sets and baby sets and things like that. I just find that I get a lot more use out of the ones that I can use on any type of card. So those are the ones I usually gravitate towards. So for today's card, I'm going to use a Year of Flowers stamp set, a background building stamp set, let's go with newsprint, and then also I'm going to use a very iconic signature series from Don McVeigh. When you see a Papertrey ink creation, a lot of times you know it's a Papertrey ink creation because of the design of the stamps. And Don McVeigh's signature series is definitely one of those types of stamps where you see it right away. And it's just so elegant and clean and simple that you know it's Papertrey ink right away. So their style is, they have several designers. Nicole Hedy is the main designer. And then the design team can also contribute ideas. So there's several designers and many in the past that have designed stamp sets for them. But basically they stick to the bold, versatile, and plain and simple images. And that's what really makes them beloved by a lot of people, because you can keep buying these stamps and you'll always use them for different things. So let's get started with our card. I'm back and ready to get started on my card. So what I have set up here is this little base for my flower images, and I'm going to do some masking and inking with Distress ink. So I'm starting out with this base of vintage cream cardstock from Papertrey ink, of course, and it is 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, and that'll just give me something to build my flower scene on. So I'm going to stamp this big one once and this little one twice with Memento black ink. And it helps with really big images, especially these that are this detailed, if you put a mouse pad underneath it. So that's what I've done here. And I'm just going to make sure that I get the middle really well. And while I'm at it, I'm going to stamp this onto a piece of scrap paper. It doesn't matter if the image is great, you just need to be able to see the edges because we're going to be cutting this out and using it as a mask. That's probably not good enough though. So make sure you get it pushed down in the middle, and that'll be good enough for cutting out. And then I'll do my smaller one. And then stamp this twice on my scrap paper. So before I go any further, I want to make sure to clean the Memento ink off my work surface here so it doesn't get all over the place. And then I'm going to cut out these masks really quickly. I'm just using some regular scissors and making sure to get really well around the edges. So I've gone ahead and cut out my masks, so now I can start with my Distress inks. So I want the flowers themselves to be mostly yellow and then the background to be more orangish. So I'm going to start out by just blending on in circular motions onto the flowers, and I'm going to make the flowers look exactly how I want them and then cover them up and do the background. So I'm really concentrating the color on in the middle of the flower, and I'm going to do this for all 3 of them. And if you haven't really experienced Distress inks yet, you can check out my video series on Distress inks. It's called No Stress Distress inks, and I actually have an ebook on it too. If you click here on the screen, it'll take you to the playlist of the No Stress Distress inks videos, and you can get started there. So now that I have the Wild Honey Distress ink on, I think my flowers are looking pretty much how I want them. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere my masks on top of my flowers. I use this repositionable adhesive by Tombow. It's the best. Now that I have my masks on, I can go ahead and start working on my background. So I'm going to first go back with the mustard seed and just get a really consistent base. And if these slip off, you can just stick them right back on. I'm going to get a really consistent base so that it looks like the flowers are really popping off and you can't see the edge of where the yellow stops. And then I can go back in with some dried marigold, which I thought was kind of cute because we're coloring marigolds. And then I'll add some spiced marmalade in. And this I'll be focusing mostly on the edges. So really quick and easy way to color. I can just reveal the mask now, which is my favorite part of this process. And you can see that took me all of, what, a minute to color, but it looks like it took me hours. So super easy. I love doing that. And actually, I forgot this though. I want to put my masks back on, and I'm going to stamp the newsprint over the top of them. And this will really make them pop off the card even more. So to use these background stamps, with this one specifically, I'm going to use all three. But I'm just going to start out with the title and pick it up on my block. I can use my grid lines to make sure it's straight. And I want this to be the upright way, so I'm going to take my pumice stone distress ink. I'm just using this because it's a good gray. I don't want it to be black where it kind of overpowers everything, but I definitely want you to be able to see the texture. So this is kind of a good compromise between going too light and being too dark. So I'm going to go ahead, get over it, and stamp down. And then switch it out for the text stamp. And then I'm going to do the ads. And here's kind of where you need to line it up, but still, it's not very hard to do because all you need to worry about is getting right over it. And even if it's a little bit off, since it's kind of fading into the background anyways, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to get right over it, and where the line matches up here, I'm going to stamp down. And then one more text strip. It's the same text strip, but you can't tell on the finished card because you're not going to be reading the words anyways. We're just looking for the texture. So now I can go ahead and reveal my wonderful flowers. And you can see they really pop out like we did this and then adhere them on top of it. It's really, really cool. So now I can go ahead and start what I'm going to adhere this to. And my plan is to do this piece of fine linen cardstock with this Moroccan Images Impressions plate. So I'm going to pull out my Big Shot. And for this, like I was telling you before, you just need to run it through like a regular embossing folder. So flip down, I'm going to flip down the bottom too since this cardstock is kind of thick. Put down the clear impressions plate. Then we have the metal embossing impression plate. Add the cardstock on top. You know what, I'm actually going to do it kind of skewed on purpose. First of all, otherwise I'd probably tape it down. And then I put the tan mats on top, put the clear mat on top of that, and then I can go ahead and run it through. And you can see we have this wonderfully embossed, or debossed I guess, piece of paper. And that'll be really cool for our background. So I'm going to put my Big Shot away. Next I'm going to bring out my pumice stone distress ink along with my blending tool, and I'm just going to use this to kind of bring out the texture around the edges. The edges are really the only part that's going to show, so you don't need to worry about going too far into the card. This is just to kind of help bring out the really subtle texture of that the impression plate left, and it will also tie into the pumice stone distress ink I used on the newsprint, so that's really cool. And you can see it got a little dark right here, but that's fine, it'll be covered up anyways, so you don't have to be too careful about it. And so now I can go ahead and adhere this to my cardstock base, which is also vintage cream cardstock. And I'm going to use some regular adhesive on this. And before I adhere this flower layer down, I want to figure out what I want to do with my sentiment. So I think I want it on this 1-inch strip of vintage cream, and I want to stamp it right here, and then I think I'm going to use a square punch to make kind of a banner. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with my Memento black ink. Then I can use my square punch to line up this edge, and it'll make a perfect banner corner every time. Perfect. I'm going to ink this with some pumice stone distress ink. And next I'll adhere down this flower layer with some dimensional adhesive. This is 1/16 inch thick, by the way. And now I can adhere this with some dimensional adhesive on top of it. And I want to point out that I'm using 1 layer on top of where the flowers are, and then 2 layers along the edge of the card, so that everything stands 2 layers above the base. And then I'm going to use my pumice stone distress ink to go around the whole edge of the card, including the banner. To give everything a really finished look, I'm going to add some pearls to this upper corner, and that will just help balance out the sentiment coming from the right hand side. So there you have it. There's definitely a lot of layers to this card, and it uses 3 different Papertrey ink stamp sets, but it really illustrates what they're all about, which is, you know, clean and simple, but really, really versatile stamps. I also even used their cardstock and an impression plate of theirs. So it really is, everything works really well together. I definitely encourage you to check them out. So here's a picture of the finished card. And here's a close-up. Thank you very much for stopping by to learn more about Papertrey ink, and I'll catch you again next time on another episode of All About Stamping.